Stan Hieronymus joins me this week to discuss new hop varieties and hop products. This is BeerSmith Podcast number 331. This is BeerSmith Podcast number 331, and it's late August 2025. Stan Hieronymus joins me this week to discuss new hop varieties and new hop products. Thank you to this week's sponsors, Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine. Every issue of Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine is packed with articles for homebrewers and beer lovers. They offer access to videos, brewing courses, exclusive articles, and the amazing Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine. Go to beerandbrewing.com to get your subscription today. And BeerSmith Web, the online version of BeerSmith brewing software. BeerSmith for the web lets you design great beer recipes from any browser, including your tablet or your phone. Edit recipes on the go with access to the same full suite of recipe building tools as our desktop version. Try BeerSmith Web today by creating a free account at beersmithrecipes.com. And finally, a reminder to click on that like and subscribe button on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, or whatever platform you're listening on. Clicking those buttons is a great way to support the show. And now let's jump into this week's episode. Today on the show, I welcome back Stan Hieronymus. Stan is the author of For the Love of Hops, as well as Brewing Local, Brew Like a Monk, and Brewing with Wheat. Stan has also penned hundreds of periodicals, and he's a certified beer judge. Stan, it's great to have you on the show. How are you doing today?
Good. I always look forward to these conversations.
It's always fun. It's great to have you back on the show. I know you've been traveling a lot. Can you tell us, start by telling us about your travels this last year and what some of the things you found?
Oh, well, not that many are beer related.
Oh, really?
You end up drinking beer, but obviously, as you know, because we just talked about it, I got back yesterday morning from a little over a week in Argentina, which was illuminating.
Nice. What's the beer scene like down in Argentina right now?
Well, this is this was their national conference for homebrewers, which I spoke at a dozen years ago. Things have changed a little bit since then. So it's always, for whatever reason, different countries in South America are different. But what's consistent is their enthusiasm for new and interesting beers. What's generally called craft beer. So not the mainstream beers, both at the homebrew level and then at lots of very small commercial breweries.
And is there a budding or growing scene down there of craft brewing?
Well, there certainly is in Brazil, and in other countries, like Chile and Peru. It's harder in Argentina, maybe because they're a little bit farther away, maybe because of their inflation. So I talked to particularly the small commercial breweries, their frustration with getting current year hop varieties. And obviously we're going to talk about the hop situation worldwide. And it really hurts them at from a supply aspect and then also the cost. So if they're talking about, and one of the presentations at the conference, a brewer from Brazil was saying the absolute minimum amount of hops you need in your hazy IPA. So that's going to be additions, just Whirlpool.
Sure.
And dry hop is 15 grams per liter. And that amounts to the same as 4 pounds per barrel. And, I talked to brewers who said, I simply can't afford to do this.
Yeah. And I know the import tariffs are quite high as well, right? That drives a lot of it. And you've got another set of dealers, rather than, for instance, here in the United States, you might be buying directly from Yakima Chief Hops or John I. Haas. Sure.
Down there, you're going to be paying somebody who pays Yakima Chief Hops. So it's another set of hands taking money out of the till.
Interesting. Well, today you did want to talk about new hop varieties. And I have first to ask, why are the new hop varieties needed when there's so many great choices already?
Well, I think if you had to do it in one word, you'd say sustainability.
Hmm.
And this has to do with if you're a brewery, there's an excellent chance that you are an important percentage of the beers you sell are hop focused. It could be West Coast Pils. It could be West Coast IPA. It could be hazy IPAs. And consumers like what is new. So if you can add them something that's a little bit more tropical, and certainly tropical citrus, exotic flavors are part of it as well. So some of these new varieties add somewhat more of that. They give you another way to spice the beer. And from a homebrew standpoint, it's always exciting to do the same thing, make new flavors. So that's one aspect of sustainability. The other is the cost of production, environmental factors. So hops, if you can take the same acre of land and grow 2,200 pounds of hops versus 1,600 pounds of hops,
mm-hmm.
and perhaps with fewer inputs, so that's pesticides, fertilizer, perhaps water, then the cost of hops does not need to go up as quickly. It is going to go up because we have inflation.
Yeah.
It's simple. So if you're just trying to keep the hops at, where I was paying, the hop you were paying, this would be at a commercial level. It's a lot different at homebrew because they've been broken in when you're buying your hops only ounces at a time.
Sure.
But if you were paying 10 pounds, $10 per pound for hops,
sure,
which in Argentina would be 10,000 pesos, or their form of peso, then that price is going to be, in a couple of years, it's going to be $11. It's just that simple because of inflation. If you're growing the same hops, for instance, a couple of years ago, fertilizer prices spiked. So those inputs over time make a big difference. If they can survive in drought situation, that makes a difference. So these new hop varieties, also, the goal is to make them much sounder agronomically.
Mm-hmm. Well, hop acreage in the Pacific Northwest has actually been shrinking over the last 3 years. Why is that happening? Given the craft beer boom, which I know is starting to turn, but what's driving that?
Well, the oversupply of hops. So that's pretty complicated why that happened. And you can go back. Now it's easier, obviously, to look backward and see by 2018 that began to build up a rather large inventory. You want, and so we're talking about the Northwest, obviously, the American Northwest. That's where
Sure.
the new exciting hops are.
That's where the vast majority of U.S. hops are grown, right?
Yeah, but the impact is also gigantic in Germany, with the other very large hop producer in the world, and much of what they grow is Hercules, and that's a hop which is high yielding, high alpha, and
Mm-hmm.
most of that alpha is just turned into CO2 extract, and it ends up in, I can't say for sure it's used in snow, which is the world's, there's more barrels of snow brew than any other beer.
Hmm.
And that's made in China. And I don't think it has 8 IBU, but you still need that bittering hop.
Sure.
So that's important to the German growers, who also produce some hops that, first for Germany, where they still brew a lot of beer. So like Perle and Hallertau Tradition. And the demand for those is shrinking because the amount of beer that people are consuming is shrinking.
Hmm.
And it matters overall beer because those large breweries support the hop farmers as well. In the case of the U.S., before 2018, breweries might have looked and said, we're growing this fast, we're going to need this many hops, we're having trouble getting particularly Citra Mosaic, and we're going to contract based upon what we think future demand is going to be. And they were wrong. They told the farmers, we want this amount of hops. Some were contracts. They also signaled that there's going to be this future demand. So between 2012 and 2021, the peak acreage was 2021, a little over almost 61,000 acres. Acreage doubled. And it shifted to, most of that was in the new exotic hop varieties. In the early part of the teens, when it just was not possible to expand Citra and Mosaic that fast, there was a lot of expansion in Cascade and Centennial. That shrunk back down quicker than the others. And when COVID hit, that made the problem worse, obviously. And breweries started saying, I can't take these hops I contracted for. In some cases, brokers work with them to move those contracts to another year. You're getting these hops you contracted here so that
push them out. Yeah.
Ongoing, taking this more inventory building all the time. And that inventory is really expensive for merchants. You're holding it. If you're paying for the storage, you also taken out loans to buy these hops that you haven't sold yet. And they're probably interest rate sensitive. So the cost of holding those hops went up millions of dollars.
Sure.
So at the beginning of 23, there was an industry-wide realization acreage needed to be cut. And in fact, acreage was reduced about 10% of what we call aroma hops, not the bittering hops. So it made a little bit less than that. That thing in 23 was also a great year. So yields were good. Overall production was not down that much. So acreage was cut even more in 24. That worked to a certain extent. So finally got production down from a peak of 115 million pounds to in the mid, like 85 or 90, I think it was. And that's just sustainability. That's just to work off the extra. So acreage is down a little bit more this year. So we've gone from 60,000 acres, 61,000 acres to 42,000 acres.
That's a pretty substantial decline, really, over just a couple of years.
Citra acreage down from 12,000 acres to 6775 in 24. It appears that was slightly an overshoot because acreage in 2025 was up. Mosaic acreage from 6,500 acres to 3,600 acres in 2024, and that went down a little bit more this year. So the goal is to get back in balance, and you realize this balance. Meanwhile, you start to fill in with other interesting new hops, like say Crush, which was named last year. And then you also have the impact of hops from the Southern Hemisphere, because they have many of them have the same qualities as hops in the Northwest in terms of being tropical and exotic. That would be most notably Galaxy from Australia and a range of hops from New Zealand. So in New Zealand, between 6-7 years ago and 23, and New Zealand was really small at the time, a little over 1,000 acres. There are several farms in the Yakima Valley that have more than 1,000 acres.
Sure.
The New Zealand acreage tripled. Now they've reduced acreage as well because there's just not enough of a market for those hops. Assumptions were made somehow that people thought that growth would go on forever, and growth never goes on forever.
Interesting. Well, obviously COVID was a big hit, but a recent study, and I'm sure you saw it as well. In fact, I saw it again yet this morning, showed that U.S. consumers are drinking less than ever before. And of course, homebrewing's been in decline for some 10 years plus. Craft brewing has been declining now for at least the last couple of years. Do you think this is a temporary downturn, or are we seeing a real shift in consumer habits here?
you shouldn't. My ability to predict the future is pretty much worthless.
Oh, I thought it was excellent.
And the I think the concern you have to look at, you do want to look at the long term, because it was an immense investment to go back to the Northwest and hop farming. There is all this infrastructure there.
Sure.
And it is what you use in the hops. First of all, hops are for beer. There's ongoing in the 30 plus years I've been writing about beer, I constantly see studies about hops being more healthy. And there are health advantages, but generally we consume them in beer.
Yeah.
And you need to drink like 42 beers a day to get the health advantages. There are disadvantages of drinking 42 beers a day.
Obviously.
So you have that. They can't grow hops for anything else. You reduce the acreage. You invested this money in the infrastructure. It's just not the acres that are out there. It is all the processing equipment, which again is only used for hops. So you have these kilns, which to begin with are only going to use less than 2 months out of the year.
Right.
And sitting vacant, and now they're mothballed. So that adjustment is really tricky. That's why hop farmers want to look, beyond the next 5 years. On a shorter term basis, I'd say that what we call craft beer or beer in general is not going to be in a growth mode the next 5 years.
Yeah.
There are going to continue to be adjustments, THC products, to a certain extent, the beyond beer products. So
I know that it's very popular now to drink those vodka-based drinks, I guess, are very popular with the younger crowd. And obviously there's other products entering the market as well that are pushing some of the beer demand off. But I do find it interesting that the overall trend in drinking is just down across the board.
Right. And the thing is their ability to use the flavoring in hops in other drinks. And there's lots of research on that, and it certainly would take promotion as well.
Mm-hmm.
But you're not necessarily going to use 15 grams per liter in that flavoring. So that is the sorting out process for people making business investments.
Yeah, I mean, obviously beer is not going anywhere. We'll have beer for many thousands of years, but
yes,
the question is at what level, I guess, and what role craft beer actually plays in the future too.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, well, let's jump into some of the new varieties. I know you've got a few new ones you wanted to highlight, for example.
Well, you've got three, two of which have recently been named, and that's a step to commercialization. You know that you can get this hop more regularly. Again, at a professional level, that you can build a brand.
Yeah, I guess before they're named, they've got some kind of experimental number tied to them or something.
Right. So we can talk like, for instance, one you're going to hear the most about is from the hop breeding company, which is Citra Mosaic, and so on, Talus, Sabro, and that was HBC 1019, which I guess it's my time frame is for travel and things, but I think it is just last week that they announced the hop would be called Dulcita.
Okay.
And in terms of hop breeding, and for the love of hops, I lay out the process, from a time a cross is made until a hop is commercialized, given a name, it's generally going to be 12 to 15 years. And this has gone through the process in 9 years. So that's faster, and that's the thing is changing within hop breeding, and the feedback that both genetic knowledge and feedback from brewers that is allowing speeding up the process of releasing a hop variety. So 1019 has gone from seed to name in 9 years.
That's pretty good.
Still not that. It's still pretty fast. And there'll be lots of people are going to use it as a single hop to see what it's like. And I'm reminded, Sabro was released in 2018. And I was in Brazil for at several different events, a couple different festivals, different times, and get an idea how people were using the hop because it's new and it's exciting. And tons of the time, they were making pina colada beers because Sabro has a lot of coconut. And that has made Sabro somewhat divisive, more than somewhat divisive. You either love it or you.
Okay.
And Sabro acreage was already shrinking before these other cutbacks. Now that it may have just meant a calculation that was wrong about how much demand there would be, or it may be that demand shrunk when people got to know the hop better, which is too bad. Used in small amounts, Sabro can add excellent nuance even to a beer.
Yeah.
But people are just throwing it in. HBC 10 Dulcita has some of the same character, can have a little bit of coconut, for instance, and in promoting the hop. So the hop breeding company is a partnership between Yakima Chief Ranches and John I. Haas. So Haas sells that hop. Yakima Chief Hops, which is Yakima Chief Ranches, is 3 ranches who are part of Yakima Chief Hops, which has more partners than YCH Hops, and may license the hop to be grown by other farmers. A little confusing, I know. That gives you 2 very large merchants promoting these new hop varieties. So in doing so, there's a certain amount of discussion about using the words tropical daiquiris and tiki drinks to promote the unique qualities. There's a lot of pineapple, peach rings, and a variety of other things. I think in 1019, what can, if and particularly YCH has started a program where many brewers have already had the opportunity to trial 1019.
Sure.
And in doing so, they could go buy it and trial it and say, "Oh, I like it." They're in a program where they provide a lot of feedback. So you're getting feedback from the brewers saying, "This is how I used it, and this is what worked. This is what didn't work." In some cases, you're actually getting consumer feedback as well, so they can pass that along. And you would hope that people use Dulcita in more in a way of thinking how it works in a recipe with other hop varieties, because it just promotes, that citrus quality you get from Citra becomes a little bit bolder. Crush, which is already this kind of a tropical salad type quality,
sure,
that just magnifies that a little bit and stuff like that. So it's an excellent hop. The other part of the hop, which we talked about, is it is more disease resistant. It's an excellent yielder. It happens, which is important to farmers, where it picks. Like I said, you've got 5 or so weeks, and you're trying to, Citra and Mosaic have an area where they are best picked at, kind of in the middle range. You don't want to have new varieties that hit that as well, because your capacity, it just won't work. You pick outside the window, your hops are not the same quality.
So you want to stagger the plants, right, I guess, so that there are different harvest times, right?
And so Dulcita is an early pick. Strata is another early pick. That's one reason, which is from Indie Hops in Oregon, has been around a while. That makes it a popular pick with growers as well. Mm-hmm. So those are kind of the pluses of that. On the other already named hop is Vera, and that's from the public hop growing program. Which is USDA. It's actually, the whole name is, so that's United States Department of Agriculture, obviously, and the ARS, which is research. which has been involved with USDA almost. The USDA program started not quite 100 years ago. And that's been ARS. So it released, the first hop released was Cascade, which worked out really well. But and that's nice and tropical. Has stone fruit, has citrus. It doesn't have a merchant promoting it in the same way. So, or giving brewers the knowledge. So brewers need to do their own research and figure out how they want to use Vera, for instance. It's nice this year at the Great American Beer Festival. This year only, there will be a category for beers brewed with Vera hops, where Vera hops is prominent. It doesn't have to be only Vera hops. It's can be at any style. I don't think you're going to see too many pastry stouts, but something that showcases Vera, and that'll create some awareness, and certainly the brewers that win the 3 medals with it, I think, will help them sell that beer and maybe move it along more quickly.
So here we see sort of the dichotomy here between proprietary and public hops. Can you talk a little bit about what the difference is between the two?
Well, so all hops were public.
Once upon a time, huh?
They're out there in the field, and naturally, they just made crosses on their own. And you had a female, you had males growing around. They pollinated them. You had this plant in the ground, and you go, hey, I'd like this one better than that one. And so you moved along. And so breeding programs started at the beginning of the 20th century. And in England, those were the ones that led, for instance, real quickly, we get Brewer's Gold out of that. And Brewer's Gold then is a parent of more than 100 named varieties, including Citra. And also including Hercules, the most grown alpha hop. And those hops were used on an ongoing basis. The first private program starts at the end of the 1970s at John I. Hops. And they were thinking in terms of the agronomics of getting alpha. They also, however, now they have this program. Breweries will come and say, I want a hop like this. Can you give me an aroma hop? That's where Citra comes about. They've invested a lot of money in those programs. And in turn, they have a product that they might be able to sell for more if it's a really good hop, if there isn't a public hop like that. So, there is a supply and demand that has allowed them more. And when a hop becomes incredibly popular like Citra, now it needs to go to multiple farms. And they are going to charge those farmers a royalty on hops, which means those hops end up being a bit more expensive.
So I guess they license them somehow for the individual farmers?
They're basically licensing the plant rights. So that's complicated. So these hops are patented for 20 years. You can trademark for longer than that. So, for instance, Simcoe was out of patent, but the trademark will go on. And certainly the hop breeding company wants to maintain the quality of Citra, of Simcoe. At Citra, this will happen in just a few years. And say if you get Simcoe brand, this is what it is. Nobody else can sell the brand under Simcoe, although they could acquire, even though this is probably more complicated we need to talk about, although I may have mentioned this before. The plant rights mean that you cannot propagate that plant itself. In other words, expand, which you can do with hop. Hops are, you can't plant seeds and get the same hop. But you can take a cutting from the hop and start a new plant.
Sure.
Can't do that with plant rights. However, you could drive around, and Simcoe will be picked pretty soon, and be just driving on a road and watch a plant fall off of that truck, and you could
you could grow Simcoe, I guess, once it's out of plant rights, right? But you can't call it Simcoe, right?
And you might have a lawsuit saying, "How did you get this plant?"
Yeah,
but I guess you could video the whole thing anyway. So that is the key difference between public and private. If you want to grow that hop, certainly one in patent, you have to go to the whoever owns that variety. And so that's not the only one. Alani's a found hop, but it's patented. And so they own the rights to that plant, and they can decide how much expansion. So it limits what a farmer can grow. If you were working with these few farms, what a brewer could use, if you're a home brewer, and lots of home brewers like to grow hops, you can grow Cascade. You can't grow Citra.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a difference. And then it becomes certainly a matter of price. And those, for instance, Vera has some disease resistance to powdery mildew. And that's could be really worthwhile for other breeders to use Vera in programs. The public hop is sitting there in the public domain, which it should be, because it's our
funded by public money.
Breeding.
Now, talk to us about I think it's HBC. You mentioned them earlier.
The Hop Breeding Company. Yeah, so that's the partnership between Haas and Yakima Chief Ranches, and they had separate breeding programs till the early aughts, and put them together, share that knowledge, even though they're doing the breeding in different locations. So
I just noticed a huge number of the experimental hops are HBC something or other.
You're seeing because and some of those might continue to exist, and will HBC 630. A few years ago, it might have looked like that was going to be the next hop that got a name. Mm-hmm. And it has a really nice cherry note, things like that. But now they look and say, maybe there isn't a place for that. Only going to be able to support a certain amount of hop varieties. Some, from a marketing standpoint, that's one factor. But also from a growing standpoint, if you're a farmer and you want to grow lots and lots of different varieties, that presents real challenges of understanding first when you're going to string them, that is, put them on the wire in the spring, to when you're going to pick them, how you're going to get different qualities that brewers want out of those hops.
Sure. Yeah, and you run into the problem like we mentioned earlier with the processing and harvesting and all the other things. Well, we've talked a little bit about this in the past, but what are some of the challenges in bringing a new hop variety onto the market? You mentioned it typically takes 15 years, at least in the past.
Well, 15 years is through the process of, the first couple of years are simply eliminating all the ones that have problems, and then seeing how they grow, and then beginning to put them in brewers' hands and see how they go, just letting them rub them, things like that. So, that's why it's interesting to see this other program by the Hop Quality Group, which is an organization of now more than 50 breweries that began, I think, when they got their charter. The discussion begins in 2010, might be 2011. And primarily they recognized that when Anheuser-Busch was sold to or became part of ABI, mm-hmm. that some of the emphasis they were doing on hop quality had changed. And they also recognized that you had farmers who were really good at growing some hops. For instance, Willamette, which is a gigantic AB hop, those contracts are going away. Maybe those farmers are going to grow Cascade and other things. So they wanted to look to maintain the quality of the hops they were getting. Got to know farmers, visited farmers, gave them support, all of these sorts of things. In the course of creating those relationships, and particularly in 2015, when there was almost no support for the public hop breeding program, they began funding a somewhat separate breeding program. John Henning at the USDA and Corvallis was still doing the brewing, but they specifically wanted hops that would be used in IPAs, or assertive, new, interesting, tropical flavors and aromas. So when those were assessed the first time, that brewers would start to say, "This is what it smells like." When I rub the hop, they wanted those qualities in the hop. In addition, they funded more, just getting those hops tested, because we talked about the IOs before, super hard to measure, and they were interested in moving hops forward that had that character. And so it wasn't just the thiols. Obviously, they're interested in the other compounds as well. But to measure those and say, yes, this has 4-MMP. Yes, this has 4-3-SMP, depending upon which terminology you're using, because I'm going to shift over the S. This has 3-SH, and it has 3-S, 4-MP.
Yeah.
And that one's a little more unique. So you get a Nelson Sullivan Hallertau Blanc, for instance. Cascade, if you let it hang a super long time. So in the course of paying for this, they were updating. Now we're 5 years in the process. I think it's 2020. And they've had these hops analyzed. Tom Nielsen, who was at Sierra Nevada at the time, now at Abstracts, was showing this chart, which has Mosaic and Citra on it, and then a bunch of the other numbered hops. And just the way it falls, there's one in the middle that shoots up. It looks like it's in the middle.
Sure.
And Tom looks at that and hadn't thought about it, and he said, "That's the middle finger hop." And that didn't mean it was going to be the one that advanced, but it is. They're going to name what's right now called, and it had a longer number before that finished 023. It's just called HQG4. And it has a lot of passion fruit, grapefruit, and those qualities. It has the advantage of being endorsed by the hop quality group.
Sure.
But, how much merchants get behind it, whether, somebody's got to commit to growing this hop, and members at Hop Quality Group have already contracted, not just for this crop, but also for the 2026 crop. So farmers will know that they're going to be selling this in a few farms. So we'll see how aware brewers are of this hop, and how then the next step, customers go, "Hey, I like beers made with this."
So has that one been named yet? You mentioned the number there.
It's
on the verge of being named.
The name has been chosen.
Okay.
But there's a lot of paperwork involved with releasing a public hop in the plant rights, because this will be now treated this. Although these brewers have made this investment, they're essentially just putting it out there for anybody who wants to grow, which is not that simple. You've got to get the plant. If you start with just one, and it's what's known as a clean plant, so it's virus free. You've either got to propagate it yourself, or you're going to have to buy it from a propagator.
So they're going to release this to the public domain. The Hop Quality Group is, right?
Yeah, and it will. There's about, well, if you count, it's tricky. There's how much is available after this harvest, and much of which is already committed to members of the Hop Quality Group. But there'll be enough for other breweries to sample it, not to build a brand around it yet. And then, of course, it has the potential to move into where homebrewers will be able to get it as well.
Interesting. Well, in addition to some of the newer varieties, we've seen an explosion of new hop products, including items specifically targeting individual phases like the boil or the whirlpool or the dry hop. as well as a whole bunch of post-fermentation products that either directly add bitterness or hop oils. How can an average brewer now deal with all these new products coming out so quickly?
Boy, that's the and these come back. Certainly, they can add extra pop to a beer. They do add extra pop to a beer, but this comes back to sustainability again.
Yeah.
Part of it is these products store better, but the other part is you don't have if you dry hop a beer. And I'll just say 4 pounds per barrel. You've got an immense amount of loss because all with pellets.
Sure.
Those pellets absorb so much beer, and that doesn't end up in beer. You end up with more in the beer. They are more expensive than pellets. In theory, you only need to use half the amount. Although some brewers use more because they want that higher impact. So you got to find that balance. Obviously, at a commercial size, it's easier to do testing. At a homebrew side, it's I would think in terms of what's available to you, whether you can do a club, a group sharing, whether you can get something from a commercial brewery. I mean, these are available in small amounts, but you only need a very, very small amount.
Yeah.
And play with them. To me, it'd be like, because I was just talking about this in Argentina and brewing monastic beers, you can fiddle around or try this yeast, this yeast, this yeast. If you want, at some point, you need to find one you like and get to know that and how you use it and what's different. In the case of yeast, obviously, treating it like a partner and understanding what's environmentally, how it wants to be fed, those sorts of things. Same thing with these products is you can dance around and say, I made this one with Incognito and this one with DynaBoost. And those are 2 flowable products that are considered, primarily for the whirlpool.
Sure.
Thinking about, and I don't know if this is still true at North Park. And North Park there's a very large West Coast IPA competition in Oregon, and North Park won this. So that's a pretty good. North Park makes great West Coast IPAs.
Sure.
Incognito is, I think, also in the dry hop. So as a post fermentation, not just a whirlpool, but saying, for sake of whatever, I'm going to try DynaBoost. If I like it, then don't mess around. Get to know how to use DynaBoost or whatever. And so that's a new one from Yakima Chief Hops. Incognito from Haas, been around a little bit longer.
Sure.
And then YCH quickly followed DynaBoost with HyperBoost, which is more like a post-fermentation, or at least during dry hopping with yeast, maybe, and can be a post-fermentation addition. The abstracts products are super interesting.
Yeah.
And
a lot of hop oils extracted from often from other plants. So
right. Well, so one what Tom Nielsen calls it, or other hop, but that won't have any hops in it.
Yeah.
So, but I think it's the linalool comes from lavender quite often. So you're forcing those sort of things. But they also do what's basically a fresh picked, a not baled hop.
Right.
So go right from the drying floor to pellets. Those pellets are then extracted. And then they do extractions from cannabis without THC. And then they do a whole spectrum of fruit-related flavors.
Sure.
Meanwhile, Haas also has euphorics, which again might have some hop products in it, but basically they're taking oils from other products and thinking in terms of how those work.
And then one of the ones you mentioned to me earlier specifically was CGX Nuvo, which I'm not that familiar with.
Okay, so there's so CGX was obviously it's another cryo product. So Yakima Chief is not the first to bring the cryo products. Hopsteiner was doing cryo powder for quite a while before that, and then turned that into lupulin pellets when people wanted pellets, when brewers wanted pellets. So, you have this whole run of cryo products from YCH. So that's when Crosby created CGX. Then a couple of years ago, and this is another experimental number, which I've now forgot the number, but it might have been 501, 502. So YCH, instead of, first they tried shipping fresh frozen hops to brewers who are interested. They'll still ship fresh picked hops like overnight. So brewers who want to make a fresh hop beer. So the idea of fresh frozen, you can make a fresh hop beer later. Fresh frozen shipping was a mess.
Yeah.
They created the product, which is now called Cryo Fresh, and previously it just had a number. And that is literally, and that's using technology that was already there for fruit. And it's fresh frozen right when it's picked. And then it's turned into a cryo product. So it's fresh frozen, intense, has to be stored frozen all through the supply chain. CGX Nouveau is Crosby's version of this. The key thing about both of those now is they're basically single farm, single farm hops, which allows them to have that, this boom farm technology. So Loftus Farms in the Yakima Valley and Crosby hops in Oregon. And they make really interesting beers. They are, I should have brought my water. The ones I've had, and they do have an extra pop. They are different. And so I see some popularity in them as well.
Well, obviously IPAs have been driving craft brewing and hop research for the past few years. With the downturn, do you see things changing a little bit in the future?
Well, an important thing will be, and to me, it makes sense why that hop water would be more popular. They got to find a price point. Hop water is up against the same thing as NAs, and how hops are going to be a part of NAs. It's gigantic for the hop market, and so if you're a home brewer, and you want to have a large variety of options at a decent price, a healthy hop market is super important to you.
Sure.
And for a healthy hop market means finding other avenues beyond IPAs, which I certainly hope they're still IPAs. And I like IPAs with plenty of hops, maybe not on the same level of hops. I started saying same level of hops, but with a fair amount of hops, but other uses of them. I really like hop water, but it does cost you a lot more than other carbonated drinks that don't have alcohol. And people are looking at NAs in those terms too. Why should I pay as much for an NA beer and I'm not getting any alcohol? And of course, the reason is the cost of processing, keeping them safe, and so on. Hops products can play a role in making your NA beers taste better, which is another for NA beers where they're just not as good. And at a point you go, people want to have an NA beer because if it tastes good and you're in a social setting. And if it doesn't taste good, that's a little bit harder. You're giving up more for the social setting. So hops are going to be a factor in those sort of things as well.
Well, Stan, I'd actually like to talk longer, but we are running low on time, so I thought I'd get your closing thoughts on some of these new hop products and where we're going next.
Well, I think they're fun to play with, and I think there's a great value as consumers and home brewers in finding being maybe not quite as omnivorous, finding a few breweries that you really like their product, and you begin to say, "Oh yeah, this is Joe's beer, and I know this family of beers." If you want to learn more about the hop products when and be aware of what they're using in those beers, that's another way to get to know the hop. Get to know the hop in a beer from a brewery that you trust and makes good beer, and you go, why is this like this? So that's another way, as opposed to saying, I'm going to do this. I also think it'd be cool for more homebrew clubs to make the decision. We're going to make a bulk buy of this hop, which is an easier way to do it, obviously. Establish those relationships with whether it's Yakima Valley hops, Hollingberry, Yakima Chief Hops does as well, that sell into the homebrew market. And you could buy a pretty good chunk of those hops. Smaller. I'd start listing. I don't want to leave out anybody. The people selling hops in Michigan and New York and so on. But a trusted source for the hops, get a decent amount of hops, have everybody make beers that would showcase that hops, whether it's the same recipe or whatever. That's another good way to get to know those hops.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, Stan, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It's really great talking with you again.
Me.
Always a pleasure. Yes. My guest today, Stan Hieronymus, the author of For the Love of Hops, as well as Brewing Local, Brew Like a Monk, and Brewing with Wheat. Thank you again, Stan.
Okay.
Well, a big thank you to Stan Hieronymus for joining me this week. Thanks also to Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine. Every issue of Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine is packed with articles for homebrewers and beer lovers. They offer access to videos, brewing courses, exclusive articles, and the amazing Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine. Go to beerandbrewing.com to get your subscription today. And BeerSmith Web, the online version of BeerSmith brewing software. BeerSmith for the web lets you design great beer recipes from any browser, including your tablet or phone. Edit recipes on the go with access to the same full suite of recipe building tools as our desktop version. Try BeerSmith Web today by creating a free account at beersmithrecipes.com. And finally, a reminder to click that like and subscribe button on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, or whatever platform you're on. Clicking those buttons is a great way to support the show. I'd like to thank you for listening, and I hope you have a great brewing week.